Recording. The user interface of Zoom has changed again, so fair warning. All right, welcome to the Advisory Committee meeting of March 3rd, 2026. We have a few items on the agenda for tonight. We have a discussion and possible vote on reserve fund transfer that has been proposed to continue CLA's school deficit review, and we have several fiscal year 27 budgets to review and discuss. Veteran Services, Advisory Committee, Select Board, Debt and Interest, Unclassified, and Non-Appropriated. I was talking, also, if there's any members of the public that want to weigh in on any of those items, drop your name in the chat and we'll call on you. Otherwise, we will begin. I was speaking with Harry earlier, and we would like to do a quick switch of one of the items and take the Veteran Services budget now, and then do the reserve fund transfer. But that shouldn't affect public comment if there are any public comments.
There are none.
All right. Susan, is Susan here?
She's typing up something. I believe Alec is going to give the report, but I'm not sure. Alec, are you the one giving the report?
Yes.
Are you prepared to do that now, or we can go to the RFT?
I can do that now. 1 minute.
Great.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm just having some minor technical difficulties. So the Human Services Subcommittee held a public hearing on Monday, February 24th on the proposed FY27 Veteran Services Department budget. The requested budget for FY27 is $296,958, excuse me. And that aligns with what was requested in the FY27 financial plan. Just for full context, for folks to jog people's memory, this department it's mandated by state law that the town have one. And in general, its duties consist of assisting eligible veterans and their dependents, as well as surviving spouses with obtaining financial aid and assistance with medical bills, among another panoply of available veteran services. The staff consist of a director, Director Bill McGorty, who I see is on the call with us this evening, as well as a full-time clerk. It is worth noting at this point, with congratulations to Director McGorty, that he has entered his semi-retirement and has continued on under a contract during the interim transition for the department, and is currently working about 7 to 10 hours weekly, supplementing the remaining staff in the department during this transitional period. During the hearing, Director McGorty provided some insights into the department's ongoing initiatives and highlights from FY26, including retaining strong referral bonds with the Veterans Administration. We also reviewed some key performance indicators with the director, including the 100% success rate for claims approvals in FY26, and the total number of Brookline veterans who received services from the department, over 1,200 individuals. And once again, as we've reiterated in past years, the Human Services Subcommittee agreed that relative to the fairly modest investment that this department requires, the return on investment that the town receives is quite substantial and valuable. So as I mentioned, the department at full strength consists of only 2 FTEs, the director and a head clerk. As things stand currently, we have Director Bill McGorty staying on in his contractual capacity, while this role has been considered for backfilling with potentially some amendments to the job description for the position. During our review, we did review the tenets of state law that govern Brookline's requirement to have such a department. That's cited as MGL Chapter 115, Section 10. And the full text of the statutes included in the subcommittee report. but it essentially requires that a town have a Department of Veteran Services headed by a veteran service officer who themselves is a veteran, and that the only exemption from that requirement comes when municipalities are allowed to regionalize these services, partnering with other municipalities in a region to create a regional service district. Um, Obviously, currently our model is the department model, and the Human Services Committee did reconvene earlier this evening to reconsider this matter, and we were informed by Department of Public Health Director John Klaschinski that the town, in considering how to backfill the VSO position, did investigate some options in pursuing regionalization, but ultimately felt due to the extended timeline for implementation that it was not feasible at this time. We were informed at the subcommittee's initial hearing that the position was potentially being kept open until after the results of the May election, with the presumption that an override would be on that ballot, and that this position, along with other positions that are coming up for backfill currently, are being reviewed by an internally created position review committee for either amendments to their scope or potentially designating these positions not to be backfilled, given the town's tight fiscal situation and the high stakes of an upcoming potential override vote. The subcommittee members, given the importance of this department and particularly the importance of the VSO position, were concerned upon hearing this. And at our initial hearing, we did vote on some very preliminary resolution language expressing the opinion of the subcommittee that this position should be backfilled expediently, that there is a real risk to the outcomes among the veterans populations in Brookline, which currently are excellent. It was noted at the subcommittee hearing that veteran suicide in Brookline has essentially been eradicated in recent years, thanks to the hard work and successful efforts of this department. The subcommittee, in our reconsideration earlier this evening, did take up differing resolution language that the subcommittee did vote to approve unanimously. I believe Chair Susan Granoff is working on writing up that language currently, with the hopes that the full AC can review that later this evening. And finally, in terms of new programming and ongoing challenges, at our subcommittee hearing, we did discuss the status of the Veterans Tax Work-Off Program. We were informed that while Director McGroarty did speak with the Council on Aging and they're directing staff to process lessons learned from the Senior Tax Work-Off Program, to this date, the Veterans Tax Work-Off Program remains unimplemented, although 2 veterans did approach the department in the last year with interest in the program. And finally, we did review some of the ongoing federal difficulties and their impact on both the Brookline veterans population and the operations of the Veteran Services Department. Director McGroarty certainly expressed some concerns about reductions in federal support for veterans, particularly regarding their access to medical care and their other associated benefits. He flagged for the subcommittee that we've already seen impacts with longer wait times, less responsiveness, and availability of services provided by the VA to the Brookline veteran population, which further underscored for the subcommittee members the importance of maintaining local investment in really excellent veteran services. So ultimately, the subcommittee voted unanimously 6-0 with no abstentions to recommend favorable action on the FY27 budget of $296,958, and also voted, as I mentioned, 6-0, supporting the transmission of a resolution expressing our position on the backfill of this VSO FTE that, as I mentioned, I believe we'll be reviewing the full language of shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill, thank you for your service. Do you have anything
Thank
to
you.
add to the subcommittee's report?
Not really. The department did well. There is a challenge now because the federal government is not normal. It's the best way I can put it. The VA locally in the medical facilities done a really good job trying to keep things stabilized, given some of their personnel issues and some of the way that some of the employees have been treated by their employer. The veterans are doing okay. There was a huge delay, especially this spring, in people getting mental health, which is not something you can defer. We worked through that in a couple different directions, and the department is going really well. The biggest asset you have in that department is my assistant, Claudia Leone, and she's really one that manages it. And when Alex spoke about the 100% reimbursement, that's, I sign the papers, but she does all the grunt work. So give her credit for what she does. That being said, I've been working about 1 day a week and a little bit of time at home, trying to keep it between 7.5 and 10 hours. And I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to stay till the summer, which if they defer getting a veterans agent, that's what would happen. So I strongly encourage you to start the hiring process sooner than later. When the health director asked me to help out during the transition, I didn't realize the transition was going to be protracted that long. I telegraphed in November 11th that I was leaving. I gave an official written notice to the health director, the town administrator, and the board of selectmen on December 18th, and I left on the 30th, and it's March, and we haven't even posted my job as far as I know.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments from the committee?
Jocelyn Murphy.
Thank you, Harry. Bill, I just wanted to say thank you too. You've had a really nice tenure in Brookline, and I know it's very appreciated by many, and I wish you well in your retirement. I have one question, and that relates to something that came up last year at the subcommittee hearing. We had talked about more engagement or increased recruitment of veterans from within Brookline, particularly younger veterans. Can you respond to how that went?
We did a couple mailings. We doubled our efforts both at the Veterans Post and at the VA. I think we brought in some younger veterans. We've actually been able to help a number of younger veterans. So that's been good. I think we need to continue to struggle, and I'm not sure I found a solution, and that's, on me, is to really engage female veterans more than we have. I've got to believe that there are more female veterans in Brookline than I'm seeing, and I'm somehow not engaging them. And that's a shame because their service is as remarkable as any male's services. And at least for my older female veterans, they were marginalized, which is a disgrace. And, as much as we can, we need to fix that and make sure that every veteran, regardless of their gender, gets or the era or any other discriminator gets the rights that they deserve and the benefits that they deserve. And Jocelyn, thank you for all your support in the cemetery and when you were in the legal office. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for the last 20 years to help me. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Good luck.
Anybody else? Dennis, I think
Harry,
we're ready for your motion. Oh,
I'll point out that we passed a resolution at the subcommittee level, and we wanted to give it to full AC to see if they wanted to adopt it. Susan is typing it up right now. I don't think she's in the meeting quite yet, but we could do this in 2 ways where we vote on the budget now, and then if you're willing to take up the resolution when she comes into the meeting, we could do it later if that's what you want.
I think that makes sense
but I do have 2 commenters. I'll start with Danelle.
Yeah, I was just gonna say exactly what David Mark said. I mean, regardless what the select board and human services have planned, like there's nothing on the table now, and we want to put that resolution forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Braga.
Good evening, Ann Braga, HR Director for the Town of Brookline. I wanted to update you on the position status for the director position for Veterans Affairs. As is our normal process, we have been getting updated information. Obviously, Bill has been with us for a long time, and we really appreciate his service. And working with the Health and Human Services Director, we have made some updates to the position description and have had the position go through the position review committee today. And it will be on the agenda for an authorization to hire on Tuesday next week.
Thank you. Dennis, that's it for the comments.
Okay, then we'll take a motion from the subcommittee, Alec. but I suspect will be favorable action on the fiscal year 27 veteran services budget of $296,958. Perhaps David Mark will make that motion on behalf of the subcommittee.
Sure, so moved.
Okay. Great. So we're voting on whether to recommend favorable action on the veteran services budget of $296,958. Harry Boers,
Yes.
Cliff Brown,
Yes.
Anthony Buono,
Yes.
Elise Kuchar-Stone,
Yes.
John Doggett,
Yes.
Harry Friedman,
Yes.
David Mark Goldstein,
Yes.
Neil Gordon,
He's not here.
Harry Grossman,
Yes.
Kelly Hardebeck,
Yes.
Elisa Jonas,
Yes.
Janice Kahn.
Yes, and Bill, you set a very high bar, so thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Brian Ladd,
Yes.
Alec Levovitz,
Yes.
Carol Levin,
Yes.
Liz Linder,
I don't believe she's here.
Pam Lodish,
Yes.
Jocelyn Murphy,
Yes.
Donnell O'Neill,
Yes.
Linda Olson-Pelkey,
Yes.
Fran Perler,
Yes.
David Pollock,
I don't believe he's here.
Carlos Ridwejo,
I don't believe he's here.
Margaret Robotham,
I don't believe she's here.
Lee Selwyn,
He is not here.
Christine Westfall,
Yes.
And Susan Granoff has joined the meeting.
Yes, and if this is on the budget, I've read it. So yes, I vote yes.
Okay, so by a vote of 21 in favor with none opposed or abstaining, we're going to recommend favorable action on that budget. Let me stop
There's-
sharing.
Okay, have we discussed the resolution that our subcommittee? Because I sent you and Harry copies of it.
I was in the
Um,
meeting at the advisory committee, I suspect. I've not seen it yet.
We
Hang on one
just,
second.
yeah, I just retyped it. Our meeting just ended at 7.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
hang on.
And I sent it to David Mark and he said he would share his screen so that it's not all that long.
I can do that, but if Harry and Dennis have it too in their email, if they want to share it.
Well, yeah, I am having, it'll take me a while to authenticate my email for some reason. So let me make you a co-host and you can share. That way we don't have to.
Okay, give me 1 minute to set this up. Okay. Share. Okay, I don't have access to share yet.
Yes, you do. You're a co-host.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay. Well, I have it now on my computer decided to wake up so I can do it. One of the two of you should walk us through what we're reading.
Can you make it bigger?
Maybe.
There's some older people in this room that they're nearsighted.
There we go.
Okay.
Well-
And since I didn't know exactly how much detail Alec went into, since I wasn't here for that part of the meeting, at our first public meeting on the budget, we had voted a resolution based on what we were told at that meeting. Over the course of the past several days, we've learned additional information, And based on the most recent information that we've learned, this is what we voted on tonight. Our concern is that there's been a delay in job posting the very important position of the director of the Veteran Services Department. Bill retired in January, and we wanted to make certain that there was no additional delays. At one time, we were told it would not even be job posted until after the town election. So we have been told that in the next week, the select board will be discussing this, and it is likely to be job posted within the next week or two. But we want to go down on record stating that this is an important position that is required by law to be filled, and that we want this to be acted upon without any delay. So what we're asking for is simply that the select board, the town administrator and his staff, and the human resources director forthwith commence the process of hiring a replacement director of veteran services, and that they expedite the process for the following reasons. One is that the town is legally obligated to have both the Department of Veteran Services and a director of that department who is a veteran. And thus, it's not a discretionary position. And two, that the work of this position is critically important to our veterans. And as Alec probably mentioned, in the past year, the department and the director helped 1,200 veterans, so that every month that goes by and it's not filled permanently with a full-time person doing the job is a loss to our veterans. So again, that's the rationale for urging that this not be delayed any further. And essentially, we've been given reassurances by John Klaczynski that this is going to happen. But just to make certain, I'm a lawyer, I'm always dealing with possible contingencies that are unexpected. And I think it's important to go down, make a record of the fact that this is a legal requirement for the town to have that position filled, and that it is really not a discretionary issue, and therefore it should be acted upon without any further delay. So that's the rationale. And is there a need to go into any more detail? Does anyone have any questions about the specific wording of it or anything?
Well, I was about to ask if there's any comments or questions from the body.
There are no comments. I would not to put in the body of it ourselves, but if this does pass, I would ask the chairman to request Lisa to send this to the select board, the town administrator, and Ann Braga, the head of HR.
Right, we would do that.
Mm-hmm.
Elise, or are you just writing in the chat?
I didn't want to take up time, but yes, I just wanted to say I thought it was thoughtfully written and well said, and just wanted to thank the committee for their service and time and making sure that this position gets filled soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's it.
So can we simply substitute the advisory committee for, can we make a motion that this become a motion of the full advisory committee?
Well, yes, I mean, that's what we'll ask you to do, is make it unfortunately, I don't have the, it's impossible to cut and paste out of a PDF. So Um, but you're moving a resolution from the advisory committee, and all the other language would be the same.
Well, and also the first sentence, a resolution from.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say. A resolution
Yes.
from the advisory committee. Yes.
Yes.
So there's a motion on the table. It will need a second.
I'll second.
The main motion is approval of the resolution urging prompt hiring of a director of veteran services as per Human Services Subcommittee memo. And Lisa and I will have the actual language that you saw before. All right, if there are no comments, we will take a vote on this. So it was moved and seconded that we're going to be urging the prompt hiring of a director of veteran services as per the 2 bullet points that were enumerated in the memo. Harry Bors.
Yes.
Cliff Brown.
Yes.
Anthony Buono.
Yes.
Elise Kucher-Stone.
Yes.
John Doggett.
Yes.
Harry Friedman.
Yes.
David Mark Goldstein.
Yes.
And Neil was not here. Susan Granoff.
Yes.
Perry Grossman.
Yes.
Kelly Hardebeck.
Yes.
Elisa Jonas.
Yes.
Janice Kahn.
Yes.
Brian Ladd.
Yes.
Alec Lebovitz.
Yes.
Carol Levin.
Yes.
Pam Lodish.
Yes.
Jocelyn Murphy.
Yes.
Danelle O'Neill.
Yes.
Linda Olson-Pelkey.
Yes.
Fran Perler.
Yes.
Chris Westfall.
Yes.
Okay, so that also passes by a vote of 21 to 0. Thank you very much to the subcommittee. Thank you, Bill. Lisa and I will follow up on this afterwards. But we can move over to the next item on the agenda, which is the reserve
Can I just make
fund.
one comment really quick, Dennis?
Oh,
before
yes,
you guys
absolutely.
step up?
Sure.
I just want to thank the advisory committee and basically the town meeting altogether. You guys have supported me and you've supported my veterans for 21 years. Supporting me is nice. Supporting the veterans was really critical, and I can't thank you enough. And I don't think any of you understand the impact that you actually made with that support, but thank you so much from my heart.
Thank you. If town administrator or the deputy town administrator are here to present the RFT, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you to the advisory committee. And thank you to Bill as well for all the hard work that you have done. And so I want to talk briefly about this request for $25,000 transfer from the reserve fund. I wish it was $25, believe me.
I'll pay it myself if it's
yeah,
$25.
Right. As you know, last year, in the midst of a report that the school budget was facing an imminent deficit in the current fiscal year and a deficit of over $8 million in the subsequent fiscal year, there were some very serious discussions about what to do, how to identify and correct the problem. We looked to other communities that had had similar issues arise. We ultimately made the decision. When I say we, I mean, in this case, the select board office, the select board ultimately voting to finance it, and then the school committee voting to accept it, to hire an outside firm, Clifton Lawson Allen, to come in and take a look at the situation, to identify the issues that led to the overages, the gap, and whether or not there were actions that could be taken. That report was conducted in an expeditious fashion. It was not an audit, a formal audit that implies a level of rigor with regard to the analysis of the figures that we just did not have the time or the money to complete. The goal was problem solving and troubleshooting, identifying the source of the issues and trying to come up with a way to fix them. And so the CLA team did a huge amount of work on a truncated schedule, and with staff in flux from the school department. They ultimately issued a report, which you can see in your packet, that contained a number of findings and recommendations for the school department to adopt. Subsequent to that, in the subsequent almost year, the school department has made significant strides in adopting those recommendations, identifying additional areas where there need to be tightened economic controls and strength, and additional areas for improvement in things like human resources, and the structure of their central office staff. There is a new superintendent. There are new folks up and down throughout the organization. They are continuing to do the work that is needed in order to not just right the ship in terms of where the school department had been, but to regain the public's confidence as well. But as part of the discussion at the Expenditures and Revenues Study Committee, there was talk about how to validate what's been done. How do we make sure that what the school department is saying is verifiable and explainable in a clear way to the community? Because right now what's out there is the report from last year. And then there are a number of subsequent reports, including from the state, that show significant progress, good outcomes for the school department, but there's no formal follow-up to the CLA report. The superintendent drafted a response to the CLA report that is included in your meeting materials now, that serves as effectively a jumping off point, talks about where the school department has been, all the work that they've been doing. It references the town school MOA that has been signed, and the progress that's being made on that front. But ultimately, in order to ensure public confidence regarding the administration of the schools, we had these discussions and felt it appropriate to seek funding to bring CLA back on a short basis to evaluate what's been done since the initial CLA report was completed, and to give a present sense impression of where the schools are now, to reassure the public that in the aftermath of that initial report, there has been a lot of remedial work that's been done, and the current leadership is really working successfully to address the issues that were identified in that report. Last time around, there was money in the select board's budget to cover the CLA report. It was $60,000. Unfortunately, there just isn't capacity in the select board's budget this year to cover even a $25,000 follow-up report. And so we are asking respectfully that the advisory committee consider an outlay for this unexpected and I would say extraordinary in many ways expense. It is relatively small in the grand scheme of things. We think it is appropriate under the circumstances, and we hope that it does what it's intended to do, which is provide an outside evaluation of how the school department has implemented and followed up on the original CLA report.
Thank you. I know that we have a couple members of the school committee here that will be able to answer any questions from this body as part of the questions and comments that may come for the town administrator. But before we do that, Val or Mariah, did you have anything you wanted to add before we go to questions and comments?
Can you see me? I can't see myself.
See the top half of your head.
Oh, okay. Hopefully that's better.
That's better.
I just want to say thank you to Chaz for the very eloquent and what I believe is an accurate summation of the process to date and where we are. I don't have any other facts to add at this point.
Great. Thank you. So Harry, I think you have the first question, so why don't you start?
Chaz, what's the time frame on this? When do you think the report, or when does the RFP require the report to come out?
So This is exempt from the traditional procurement process because of the consulting services on this. So we wouldn't have to go through the 30-day procurement and so forth, which is good. It's a follow-on from the prior report. CLA thinks that it could be turned around in 2 weeks' time. Realistically, I want to give them 3 and probably a little bit extra. My goal is to get this done as soon as humanly possible. If it could be done before the deadline for setting ballot questions, I would be ecstatic. I really want us to have this information before the select board has to make a decision on ballot questions. And so that would be my goal, is to have this by the end of the month.
So I somewhat sympathize with the goal. My fear is that we're going to have an override, which I assume will be on the ballot. A large percentage of that override presumably is going to go to the schools. And if the CLA report comes back and says the schools have done a fabulous job in correcting everything the previous report criticized, then some people are going to think this is the town putting its thumb on the scales in favor of a yes vote. And if the report comes back, either the schools have done a crappy job of coming up to snuff, or it's Metza, that's going to be looked upon as sort of putting the thumb on in favor of the no campaign. And so I'm wondering, as much as I think this information might be needed, I'm wondering if it should come out before the election, whether we should really try to get the information, but postpone it till after May 5. That's my concern.
I think that's an interesting, I understand where you're coming from on that. I understand that school of thought. My goal in all of this is to be as transparent as possible. And I think the community is owed that transparency by us. Right now, we have this report that's out there that people are referring to that is out of date. And I think, I don't know, because CLA will do this independently, but I think what they're going to find is that, yes, there's been progress. In some areas, there needs to be more progress. For example, we're moving on this working group to work to, get our systems aligned all on Munis. But because there's been such churn in the school department, it hasn't moved forward as much as we want it to move forward. And I think CLA will flag that and say, that's an area where you could be doing better. So I don't think this is going to be a bed of roses, everything's great, congratulations report. But I think it's going to be an honest assessment of the progress that's being made thus far. And I think on the balance of things, the community I do think the community deserves to understand how far we've come and how far we still have to go in terms of this process. And I would rather them go into any potential vote clear-eyed about it, rather than feeling as though all I've got is this report from a year ago and the say-so of the people around that, hey, things are better now. You don't have to take my word for it. I think we should get some outside eyes on that to make sure that they concur that things are better than they were, and that real progress is being made.
Thank you. Carol Levin.
Hi, thanks. I appreciate and love the idea of having CLA come back and assess the state of things, how far things have come. I think my concern is how that gets interpreted by the public. And one of my personal concerns is that it will be viewed as they're doing everything great now. And one thing that the original CLA report didn't look at, because that wasn't their charge, is historical practices that are bad and are not good management. And the thing that comes top to mind, and I'm not laying this on the school committee, I'm laying it on the town in total, are the classroom capacity leases, which have taken, at this point, it's going to be over $800,000 out of the CIP to use for something that many people argue should be an operating expense. And by putting that in the CIP, some might argue, I might argue, that it understates the deficit that the schools are facing. And it removes the need, the urge to get a handle on these classroom capacity issues. So I guess I'm asking, and I'm struggling to articulate this, Chaz, and I apologize. Is there some way to have a report by them look at those things that weren't part of their initial charge? In other words, practices that aren't illegal, maybe within our current policy, but are bad practice.
It's a great
including
question.
those leases.
Yes. I can think of some other areas that they didn't cover that we should be focused on in terms of best practices moving forward. I don't think we can get CLA to do that. I think that would be scope creep. I think it would ultimately wind up exceeding the scope that they're thinking of here. What I will say is that that's also the purview of expenditures and revenues, right? And we are seeing that come out of the school subcommittee there, the futures subcommittee. Those subcommittees are starting to make concrete policy recommendations going forward that will be very important for the town school partnership to follow up on. And I will say expenditures and revenues is talking about its own future too, right? Talking about how to build accountability into those recommendations, making sure that this is not just a report that sits on the shelf, but is something that is returned to on a regular basis by a committee that revisits these and tracks compliance and talks about what's working and what isn't. So I think between CLA being focused on the things that CLA focused on and expenditures and revenues being focused on these longer term best practices that maybe weren't covered in this report, you do have a structure of follow-up and accountability on this. I know that's that issue is a bugbear for many on advisory, and I share the concern. I hear where it's coming from. I understand why. There are a lot of issues that I think we need some significant time and effort at the town school partnership to work out. But I think expenditures and revenues provides the kick forward on that and is starting to talk about how to build out practical accountability. So
then I would highly encourage whoever writes the cover memo to the CLA report have certain qualifiers to make clear what it is saying or what it isn't saying, and talk about this and mention that there are things that have not been looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Elise Couture-Stone.
Hi there. Yeah, I think Chaz ended up really covering what I was planning to say, which is that I am sort of thinking of this CLA report as an exercise in accountability, and this gives the AC the opportunity to be able to say, like, okay, we did this last year. Let's follow up on this specific report, which as a parent, I haven't heard anything really about this, and I'm on the AC school subcommittee on some of the responses. So I think this provides a really good opportunity for us to see where we're at, and to renegotiate where we can be stronger, and to look at where we've been improving. So I think this is a positive thing.
Thank you. Cliff Brown.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. So I want to first thank Chaz for his comments. He did a really great job of summarizing, as Mariah had said. The push for this came from the school subcommittee of expenditures and revenues, and it really sort of like started a discussion last fall when there were additional concerns expressed in the community about some of the financial practices or some of the things that were published by Brookline News and so on and so forth. And the belief on the school subcommittee was that it was important for both the schools and the town to sort of like get out in front of that narrative and essentially go back and to say to CLA, okay, just tell us whether or not the schools did what you asked them to do or suggested they do, and how well did they do it. And the report is going to be limited. I think it's not something that people are going to be able to look at and expect that it does anything more than refer back to the specific questions that CLA was asked to look at last spring. I think it's going to be very limited, and it's going to be very hard for anyone to draw any additional conclusions from what they're going to do. I love Carol. Everyone knows I love Carol, but I do want to make a comment about the leases. And that is that the decision to put the leases into the capital budget was made by the select board back in 2014 or 2015 as a means to reduce the amount of an override that they were going to bring to the community. That was the genesis. That was the policy. You know, it's something that went on longer than it should have. It's something that certainly was not in keeping with the town's financial policies about what was capital and what wasn't. But that's where the decision was made. And that's where you can look at where the decision perpetuated itself.
Thank you. Carlos Reduejo.
Thanks, Barry. So my question is really why is, well, I have two questions. The first one would be, why is this extraordinary unforeseen? Why wasn't this part of the initial scope? Because, you know, you do a report and then you probably should figure out if the report is being followed up. So that would be the first question. And then the second question is, if this was extraordinary and unforeseen, but back, as Cliff just said, back in November, we were sort of asking for it. Why is it coming up now, right before the final number for the override is sort of being studied or looked at? It just, for me, the timing is it's hard to separate the timing of this with the override itself as a support for the override. So
can I take this one, Chaz? Do you mind?
No, go ahead.
So, you know, what I said, Carlos, is that we started talking about it in the fall, okay? And whenever you go back and take a look at when the last Brookline News article came out about the lawsuit, that's when we really started talking about this. I think the timing of how things, you know, work their way through expenditures and revenues, because that's where the genesis of this came from. You know, you have to realize that. And it's a process. And, you know, you're going to see the final reports. They're going to have lots of recommendations, as Chaz said. And, you know, that report's going to come out right before the select board goes and puts something on the ballot. Do I think this is an extraordinary and unforeseen situation? Yeah. Do I think that we could have had the foresight and asked for a report and a follow-up to that report last spring? Sure, we could have, but that wasn't done. I don't think it was purposeful to, gee, let's not have a follow-up. I think that things happened in the fall that really raised the issue of making sure that what the school committee was sort of informing people about could be validated, given everything else that was being said in the community. From that perspective, I think this is a no-brainer. I have no idea what CLA is going to come back with. I do know that the MSBA came in and did an audit of certain things at the schools, including, you know, the school committee folks can tell you better, the IDA grant and how that was being managed. And, you know, the school committee and the public schools of Brookline passed that with flying colors. You know, no issues whatsoever. And so I think this is something the community needs to see one way or the other. It's transparency, and that's what we should be supporting.
thank you, Cliff. I just wish that this had come up in a month or two ago. That's just because it would be less tied to sort of the discussion of the override. It would be more tied to practices and how it's you know, practices regardless of the override. And that's, I just feel that's more transparent in some ways, but that's just my opinion. Thank you.
And so I want to point out that Mariah has written in that this was a DESI review, not an
I'm sorry, that's what I
MSBA.
meant. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Janice Kahn.
Hi, thank you very much, and thank you for all the hard work. I want to look at this from another perspective, which is I also read the response of the schools to the CLA report, which I thought was also interesting. But what what struck me is comment after comment about not having been here when there were the problems. So I just want to take a look at that for a minute and see whether maybe CLA, maybe they need to do it after there's been more stability within the department. There's still the people who have come in have not been here all that long. And it would be helpful, I think, to me on advisory to have more longevity in terms of whether systems are actually working or what I have no doubt that progress is being made. And and I appreciate all of that. And so irrespective of the override or whatever, I just think that we might be able to actually get more and more useful information if we waited until the schools really felt like they were more stabilized beyond a year or so of with the administrative staff. So just a comment.
Thank you. Elise Couture Stone.
Yeah, I just wanted to, this is my youngest, Maud. She decided to join us just now. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I really appreciated Janice's comments, and I hear what you're saying in terms of getting a fuller breadth of, especially with the new staff that's come on board. And to Carlos's point, I also understand having a concern around it coming up at this particular juncture. But I also think it's important to note that I think every person, certainly in AC and on town staff side and town meeting, we are all coming to this place, I firmly believe, in good faith. And I think we need to start understanding and treating and speaking to each other in this way so that we can start to work ourselves out of this situation, because this isn't just a Brookline problem. This is going on across all municipalities. And I think we need to find a way to really work together so that, the little ones aren't really as affected as they will be if something like this doesn't pass. So that's all I'll say. I really didn't know she was going to show up here.
Thank you. Elisa Jonas.
Hi, I just wanted to follow up on what Janice said. Mariah, could you speak to the concern that Janice had? Do you think that this is the right time, or would we be better served if it was if we had a little more time to see what actually happens with the new staff?
Well, I would highlight that we have signed a 4-year contract with the superintendent. We have 3 deputies, or I'll say 2 deputies who are permanent, 1 who is an interim. They have, I haven't done the math, but I would guess at least 7 decades of experience across them. So I think that while you can say it is a new team, there is a strong trajectory of stable leadership at this point. New leadership, but with stability going forward and high experience. I also think that, there's an opportunity. I think Chaz described it, or I'll describe what Chaz said, as almost like it's a snapshot, and some things we know aren't complete, like the Munis working group. And this is an opportunity to continue to ensure that our practice our collaboration across town and schools is stronger over time. So I'm not sure it has to be an either or. I think that we should continue to make sure that we're progressing on the right track. And as Cliff alluded to, there's going to be a whole bunch of recommendations coming out from ERSC. We should all be sort of thinking about how we follow up on these things over time. Not necessarily through CLA every time, but if we have a relatively strong report from CLA at this point, we can put a pin that aren't on the things that are still to be resolved and keep moving ahead on the other things that we've identified as a community that are improvements we want to make.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't wondering whether the new staff have adequate experience. It's just, have they had the time to implement the recommendations? And if they haven't yet, it seems, I would agree with Janice that it's premature. So I'm wondering, have they had the time to do that?
The documentation that I believe, did you all receive the materials from the superintendent?
Yes.
She goes through all of the points, and yes, we are substantially compliant with everything. I believe the only thing, I'm just going off of memory right now, but I believe the only thing that is less complete is the collaborative munis working group, which, as Chaz mentioned, due to staff turnover on both sides, has not progressed as far as they would like. But otherwise, I'm not CLA, but my assessment is that that things have been substantially complied with as articulated in the MOA and as identified the opportunities for or the recommendations in the CLA report overall.
Your memory is correct, Mariah.
Thank you.
Elisa, you all set?
Yeah.
Christine Westfall.
I'm going to support this. I understand Janice's reluctance and yours, Alyssa, but the reality is that this is a very short money, very quick review, and it really falls under the heading of trust but verify. I don't think we want to wait a year or a year and a half and then find out that nobody started implementation. I think we want some reassurance that the implementation that they're reporting is actually happening. And I believe that that's what Chaz is saying he's asking them to do, essentially. And I think that this is timely. Will we need other reports going forward at some point? The answer to that is yes. And the reality is that the amount that we're paying for this represents the fact that it's going to be a quick overview. And I think a quick overview at the beginning of the process is helpful.
Thank you. Jocelyn Murphy.
Thank you, Harry. So I wanted to wait until other folks had commented because I was interested in hearing what other perspectives were, but I believe this is an inappropriate use of reserve funds. Under Chapter 40, Section 6, those funds are only to be used for extraordinary or unforeseen expenditures, and I don't think this is either. I think reserve fund transfers are for needs, not wants, and this strikes me as a want. But more than that, I mean, I have complete faith and confidence in our new school superintendent, and frankly, in the chair of the school committee. And I believe that it's their job to inform the public about the progress that the public schools have made. And frankly, if any of you had the opportunity to read the superintendent's, I think it's an updated set of comments responding to the CLA report, I think you'll agree with me. The superintendent has responded to the 11 discrete points, findings, and recommendations that CLA made. And I think it's up to them to persuade the public that their response has been appropriate. And in these lean times, when all of us, the advisory committee, for example, has reduced its allocated budget by $750, I mean, I think it's our obligation to be very tight gatekeepers of the town coffers. And I also have a question about whether the timing is related to the override and whether or not this might be a campaign finance violation. I don't know. I haven't had the opportunity to look into that. But I don't believe that it's an appropriate use of reserve fund reserve funds, and I don't think we should be opening that gate. I think it's a mistake on the part of this advisory committee. So I'll be voting against it. And if my colleagues here on the advisory committee are inclined to vote in favor, I will be moving for advisory committee member participation in developing the focus for the report. Thank you.
They're done. Yes, David Mark.
A question, but also to follow up on what Jocelyn just said. I thought that if we were going to prove that the scope and everything was already laid out, are you saying, Chaz, that it has to be developed further before it starts, or are we at the point where we know exactly what we're going to be asking from them?
Oh, sorry, David. The final scope has to be developed. We don't have it yet. But my goal in this is using the superintendent's report effectively as a base, and then validating backing up that report, saying, all right, the schools say that this is their position currently with regard to all of the CLA findings and progress on the MOA. What is an independent analysis of whether that position is accurate, and what remains to be done? And so that scope, my hope, is relatively simple, and can be completed in a short time frame.
Okay, thank you. And then my main question is about the town audit committee, which we have. Are there going to be areas of concern or areas of opportunity where the town audit committee could work cooperatively with the school committee, well, hopefully cooperatively with the school committee, to follow up on some of these things in the year or years going forward? Or would the town audit committee just not be appropriate in this particular case?
The town audit committee really focuses on the broader audit itself, the fundamental audit that we are supposed to undertake every fiscal year. With that said, they did play a role in this last time, and I was very grateful for the role that the chair of the audit committee, Paul Healy, played in working through this. And I do think that there are opportunities, if they are identified as areas for improvement, that the audit committee can follow up on those with the school committee and ensure that our financial practices are as strong as they can be. We just received the FY24 audit. There's a lot to discuss about the audit capacity that is out there now for municipalities and what we need to be doing to strengthen it, frankly. But that is a discussion that I'd be happy to have with the audit committee. If there are some findings made by CLA in this that they can play a role in following up on.
Great, thank you.
Janice Kahn.
Yes, thank you. This conversation's led to more questions in my mind. So first of all, Mariah made a comment that I've been thinking about, that there will be ongoing evaluations within the school department. Cliff made me think that the revenue and expenditure study is going to have specific oversight. Maybe it will continue, in fact. I don't know if in its final report, I don't know. I look forward to the final reports. But what's looming in my mind now is we do know that there is a huge reserve fund transfer that's going to be coming our way, and that's for snow and ice. And I know that we have about $3 million, a little over $3 million, 3,100 maybe, 3.1 million in that reserve fund. Do we have any estimates as to how much this reserve fund is going to be? And then I am inclined to think that maybe this isn't the best use of our reserve fund at this moment. Yeah.
Yes, preliminary. This is going to be a banner year for snow and ice. This is probably going to be the single biggest reserve fund transfer for snow and ice. It will beat out 2015. 2015, that transfer was over $1 million. So I think you can kind of take it from there. What I don't know is how we are going to what I don't yet know is how we're defraying that cost from other sources in DPW and elsewhere before we come to you for that final accounting. So I don't want to put a fine point on it. What I will say is, between snow and ice and fire and this and anything else that we may encounter, with the DPW transfer station and so forth, this is going to be a tight year for the reserve fund. I would not make this ask if I thought we were going to run this too tight. right? I definitely think that this is going to be a year where the reserve fund is taxed and stretched. But I also think that there is capacity for $25,000 in the reserve fund for this undertaking. So I think two things can be true. You're right that this is going to be a tight year for the reserve fund, but I also think that under the circumstances, given that the select board can't finance it the way that it did last time, that it's an appropriate ask to make.
Thank you.
Thank you. David Mark.
Thank you. I'm going to support this, but I do want to alert the AC to know that the reserve fund transfer for fire is probably going to be about $1 million this year.
Elise.
Yeah, so I think Janice and Jocelyn bring up really good points. And so I'm curious, how do we then balance the transparency that Chaz was talking about to the community with these really tight budgets? What would that look like, do you think?
I think in this instance, right, it's a question of community priorities and the needs as they arise, right? We didn't know at the time that we financed the first CLA report that there would be this level of follow-up needed. We didn't know what we would find, right? At the time that we went out to CLA the first time around, we were really worried about, Dennis, I saw those balloons.
Well, that's me. I didn't do anything.
Thanks
I
very
was like,
much.
oh, it's a party. Okay.
I'm just sitting here
it's like-
stroking my chin. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
I have a very different reaction to that period of time. We were really those were some dire times. There was a lot of yelling in my office. So you know, we really were trying to get to the bottom of how we could wind up in a place like this and what we could do to kind of climb out of it. And I think when we weigh the question of, you know, is it worth it to spend this money on an unexpected expense, which is having someone come back and externally validate something that has been internally validated. And I think, you know, I agree with Jocelyn's point. I think people should read the superintendent's report, but I also think it's important. I do think it is important when you have this external report and you have all of this material out there, that people have confidence from an independent source of the work that's being done and the work that still needs to be done, right? I think it's important not to paint a rosy picture. I think it's important to say there are realities that we still need to address, and that is going to be a conversation, override or no override, that needs to happen in order to move this forward. And frankly, I think having the impetus from CLA to externally validate and say, yeah, you know, the town school partnership as a body needs to be proactive in changing the way that we do business, the way that we share resources and share operational supports and so forth. I think that's important. I think that's important regardless of whether or not there's a question on the ballot in May. And so I think given the concerns of the community, given the push from the Expenditures and Revenues Study Committee to look at this, I do think that it is an appropriate use of these funds to try and analyze this. And I think we have the balance for it, notwithstanding, and I don't want to minimize the fact that you have two large reserve fund transfers in your future, one from fire and one from DPW for snow and ice.
Yeah, I guess my follow-up question to that would be, or what are the trade-offs that we don't know? You know, like for me, I always think of what are the known knowns I have, and what are the known unknowns I have, and then what are the unknown unknowns I have. And for me, that's an unknown unknown, what those trade-offs are and how do we weigh this? Because everything you just spoke of, in terms of transparency and getting the answers out to the community are absolutely valid. But then when I think of public safety, I mean, we're balancing some pretty tough stuff here.
I think that's ultimately right. This is where the political process ultimately comes in, right? If folks think that this is an appropriate use of these funds for these expenses, then the advisory committee can approve it. If they don't, then they don't have to. You can talk about that in terms of prioritization. You can talk about that in terms of appropriateness. You can frame it any which way. And you know, my role is to put the question before you, but I understand that there are pressures that are non-operational that play into this, that are prioritization and political questions, and that's not for me to say. So I defer to you all on how you want to prioritize these things, and they're hard questions, hard issues.
Thank you. Carlos.
Thank you, Harry. This is a question for Chaz. So why is it so important that this study happens or is finished before the override? Because if it's talking about, are they implementing what has been recommended, it, as some other members of the committee have said, it almost makes sense to, have it a year from now or so forth. And I also feel like if you had it after the override, then there would be no chance for anyone to say that this is connected in any way.
Sure.
So that's one question I have.
I would like for the community, and particularly the select board, as they talk about potentially setting a ballot question, to have this information. I don't think it puts the finger on the scale one way or the other if we make very clear that this is not intended to, produce a particular response. CLA is, the whole point of this is that CLA is independent, and it will be able to produce a response that is not going to be influenced by the politics of the town of Brookline one way or the other. I would much rather people have the information that they feel they need in order to make an informed decision one way or the other on this, rather than, I certainly don't, I think it would be a failure of this process if it promoted a particular outcome. I don't think that's what it should be doing in the slightest. I think it should be evaluating this very narrow question. We had a report last year that said, here are our findings and here are our recommendations. Did you follow them? If not, why not? And if so, what are you doing? I think that's information that the select board needs to have. The Expenditure and Revenues thinks that that's information the select board needs to have, and that the broader community needs to have. So I don't view this.
It just feels really rushed in a way. But my second question is, so 2015, I had to throw the snow many feet into the hills, so it was like, three or four times more snow than we've reached so far. And this week, it's supposed to rain and 50 degrees and so forth. So why would this year be bigger expenditure than 2015? Because we've had a couple big storms, but in quantity of snow, we've had less snow.
Couple of reasons. One, cost of contractual services has gone up. The cost of supplies has gone up. Cost of salt and sand and all of these things has gone up significantly. Cost of inflation. The other thing is we now pay a premium for our workers to come work on these days, part of a contractual obligation that that wasn't there in 2015. And I will say, I don't want to speak on behalf of the commissioner, but that has had a significant positive impact in terms of morale and in terms of people out there. So yes, the cost is more, but that's because the cost of doing business since 2015 has increased significantly, both in terms of our personnel and contractual services and supplies.
So is there a premium because we don't have a sanitation department that used to do a lot of the snow removal? Is that anything in there, or?
No, I don't want to speak, I don't want to speak about when we had a lot of people on sanitation versus now. I don't think that's the case, but I would want to double check with the commissioner on that. But in terms, again, recall, when we moved to private contractual services for trash pickup, as opposed to just recycling, which we were already doing, we kept those people. We didn't lay anybody off, right? The positions that we had were open, and we eliminated those positions, but we didn't actually decrease the availability of people to do this work.
So I think when the snow, just heads up for you and I guess the commissioner, I think it would be really important for the advisory committee that when the snow the Stowe reserve transfer comes by, that we can get a comparison between, say, this year and maybe last year or the year before that on contractual outside contractual services versus in-house contractual services, so that we can see how much more has been contracted out versus what it used to be, so that we can sort of understand where that number is. Because again, this, when we made those decisions about reducing the number of employees at sanitation, some of us brought up the idea that it's sanitation and snow removal, because CLL licenses and so forth, that they can drive the trucks. And I think it would be interesting, and also in the name of transparency, important to show what the repercussions are, no matter which way they go. What the repercussions are of making a big decision like privatizing the trash and having less sanitation workers that can do snow removal. So that's just a thought for when that number comes up.
We'll be sure to have that information. But I will say, to your point, the last 2 years have not been heavy snow years. So you're kind of comparing apples and oranges there, except for the fact that there were a lot of positions that were unfilled because we couldn't fill them.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis.
I don't want to comment on the pros or cons of this specific vote at this particular time, but I did want to. There's a few things that happened in the discussion that I thought were worthy of note. Because I think Cliff touched on this very early on, that the whole impetus for this process was, last year there was a question about how funds were being managed within the school department, and this body was presented with the proposal to approve funds being spent that were going to be spent under the purview of the school committee to conduct, essentially its own investigation into its practices. And we as a body felt very strongly that there should be an independent auditor that reported to the town school partnership, that had a variety of actors, including ourselves, participating in that particular process. And I think that was a good thing. And to the question of whether on the sort of trust but verify side of things, I think it is important to preserve that level of independence as we continue to assess the behavior. I also think that engaging in these sorts of audits, or reviews, not just for the schools, but for other departments, should remain something that is within the general purview of the advisory committee. And as we look at future budgets, the question of whether some modest amount of funds should be available for that purpose that would not involve dipping into the reserve fund to do it would be a good thing to consider. Perhaps in this year of tight budgets, that's not completely appropriate, but it's the kind of thing that we really ought to be considering. And I've mentioned this to the town administrator in the past, that I think it's quite unfortunate that his budget doesn't have funds for this in this fiscal year, because I think we're going to want to do more of this. And then I would also add that I think the comments that have come from Harry and Jocelyn and Carlos, who have expressed real and possibly others, I don't want to leave anybody out, concerns about the perceived political valence of such a review. Chaz, I think it would look really, really bad if we were to vote in favor of such a thing and the report didn't come back until the end of April. I would encourage, if this ends up being, if the body decides to move forward, that you should endeavor to get the results back well before the select board votes. And if it doesn't look like that's going to happen, sit on the results until after the election.
I think that's a very fair thing to thing to ask. The sort of starting gun for this from a campaign perspective is when the ballot question is set. That's when a lot of the restrictions on the town side of things come in, and we would not, I send a memo out to my staff every year. I'm actually sending it out early this year because I'm so concerned about this issue. We absolutely cannot have any sort of political valence to this. So it is what it is. If it's not going to work, it's not going to work.
Thank you. Elisa Jonas.
Hi. I continue to mull what Janice and also what Jocelyn said. I know I've always thought that we made an inappropriate decision when we funded a feasibility study for an indoor pool, which was not an unforeseen emergency circumstance. And I don't feel that that is the case now, especially given how soon the study came out and what's been going on. It seems to me that maybe I'm forgetting things, but it seemed like the two major financial findings that should have an implication for the override or not is, are the schools now more appropriately using all their reserve funds? And it seems to me that's something that hopefully we have expertise in town to be able to determine. And the other was concern about the amount of funds being used for professional services and trying to remember what I guess out of district payments. And for those two, it doesn't seem like we will have enough time to analyze that, which is what Janice pointed out. So what really is the rush to have this done now as a reserve fund transfer when it just doesn't seem like a reserve fund transfer? If what we're really concerned about is, hey, have we done everything we can do to justify whether to have an override or not? And again, as Carol said, there's a lot of elements that haven't been considered. So for this, I'm not sure where this study gets us. I'm totally in support of transparency and seeing whether the schools have done what was recommended, but I don't see it as something that needs to be done right now. It'd be great if I could understand better why it does, but I just don't see it. Is there something I'm missing financially that it would be helpful to get this done right away, that it deserves a reserve fund transfer? Is there something more than looking at whether they've now started to use their reserve fund?
I mean, I don't know if that's rhetorical or not, but I mean, ultimately, to me anyway, and to my understanding was from the subcommittee of the Expenditures and Revenues Committee, the point here is in informing the select board to make an informed decision about what kind of ballot question to put out there, if any. And that is time sensitive. They have to do that by March 31st. I think the select board is really struggling with that, just based on the public comments that the members have made at Expenditures and Revenues and elsewhere. The number that's being asked by the schools right now is a huge number. I don't want to minimize that. And I'm not saying that the town is perfect in the schools or not. I don't want to frame it that way. But what I'm saying is there's a big ask out there. And in order for the select board to validate that and be able to make an informed decision on it, then having an independent analysis to inform their judgment is really critical in this. Because, right, you could take the school's word for it, or you could get someone to come in and make sure that that's actually what's happening.
But I guess I'm wondering, what exactly are all those findings that are financial that make a difference. I can only think of using reserve funds and then being more careful with settlement and out of placement expenditure. And it seems like those we could be pretty, the second we can't do yet, it's too soon. And for the first, that seems like that's something that I'm sure that the expenditure and revenue committee could be able to assess that.
Well, I think, yes, they are assessing that. But I also think that when you look at, for example, right, like look at what's out there in terms of the allegations that were made last year about, how the special education program was run, and what was offered and what wasn't, and all of those things. And look at how it's doing now. If you've been following along with the conversation since Dr. Schmuckler was put in place, you can see it's a totally different process. But most people aren't following along with that. Most people don't have a clear narrative that explains what's gone on since Dr. Schmuckler came in. And CLA can provide that analysis and verify it, right? Because I think Dr. Schmuckler tells a great story about how she's been able to come in and provide this and to ensure that we are not, giving the store away, providing services that don't need to be provided, or, making exceptions for people on the basis of, well, we know this person, so we're going to give them something. Like, that's not happening. And that's really critical because there were allegations in the CLA report that was happening. And I think it's really important in those circumstances to be able to externally validate that before you put a question on the ballot that says, should we give these folks more money?
Right. I agree. Thank you for that. That makes me feel more comfortable.
Cliff, did you have a response directly to this, or you?
I was just going to say to Lisa, but it's really hard. The money for this came from the select board, right? We were going to maybe do it. If we don't do this, I don't think any sort of review is ever going to happen. I don't think the school committee is going to, say, okay, well, we didn't think we needed to, check ourselves back in the fall. We thought that you should just, take our word for it. So, if you're not going to do a study, that's fine. You're taking our word for it. And I don't think the select board is going to come out of pocket and do it either. So the question really becomes this: do you want to know? And if you want to know, then this is what we're going to have to do. If you don't want to know, then fine.
But I wasn't saying that we don't want to know. I'm saying, is this an emergency unforeseen expense that justifies doing it now? Maybe it should be in the advisory committee budget for next year.
Our $25,000 budget. Yeah. Okay.
Well, no, increase it. I mean, it's got to come from someplace, whether it's from the reserve funds or a budget.
Well, so Lisa, let's have a larger budget, and we'll take that out of money that might go to the reserve fund, because it has to come from somewhere. But
I agree with what I can see what Chaz said, that we need to find that the schools are acting more in line with what's more.
They have the systems in place, the procedures in place, because all those, create the envelope for good financial management. And so, yeah.
Right. I guess I was literally just thinking from the financial perspective, there's not that much that they need to look at, but to add to the legitimacy of the school department so that people feel more comfortable with an override, were they to choose that, I can see where
or to identify issues. Or to identify issues that may not have been addressed, so because people might want to know that before they decide to give money, right?
Right, exactly, right.
Thank you. I just want to remind people that one of the advantages or disadvantages of the Zoom platform is that when two people talk at the same time, nobody talks. So just keep that in mind. Jocelyn.
I've lost track of what my two finger was. I think it had to do with what Dennis said, which I completely agree with. But, I'd like to remind people that the original CLA consulting arrangement began as a reserve fund transfer, right? And the advisory committee had applied a number of conditions which apparently didn't pass muster with, the powers that be. And so the town administrator found money in the select board office budget to pay for it. And I think that's something we have to be mindful of, but I'm still struggling with the fact that we have a new superintendent. We have a fantastic deputy superintendent for student services, Karen Schmuckler, who is really extraordinary. I have a lot of experience having worked with her for a number of years. And I just believe we have an obligation to trust the people that have been hired to represent the department. In addition to the fact that I believe that this is an inappropriate use of reserve funds. So I'm really having trouble with this. I think it's clearly about the override and that's okay. But I believe we should be supporting and believing in the staff in the public schools. And I frankly think that Bella Wong and Karen Schmuckler are very well equipped to do that without this expenditure. But I can see that many of my colleagues seem to be in support of this. If that's the case, I will be moving to condition approval on some representation or participation from a member or members of presumably the school subcommittee on the advisory committee, just to ensure that from the perspective of the fiscal advisory committee, that this report is headed in the right direction. Thank you.
Jocelyn, I would love it if you could draft some language that you are imagining so that we have a chance to look at that. Since you're about to make a motion, I don't know what that conditional will look like.
In the chat, Dennis. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Elise, I'll go to you before Anthony's two finger.
Mine is brief. I guess I just wanted to respond to Jocelyn just in terms of the conversations I'm having with parents at pickup and drop off. And I absolutely agree with you. We have these wonderful town employees with these amazing degrees who are brilliant, and we should be trusting them. Absolutely. My understanding, and please, anyone correct me where I'm incorrect because I'm still new to this. My understanding, though, is that the CLA report was covering a different staff group, and that we are still responsible to the community to share with them how this new group is correcting some of those failures that took place. And I don't know the intricacies of what was going on in the politics and all of that stuff, but I do know that a lot of parents are getting to a space where they would rather, and they are using this word, quote, punish schools by not voting for an override. And they're saying this without fully comprehending the breadth, I think, of what we talk about on AC and what these other subcommittees do. So that would be my fear for not supporting this tonight. But that's just my 2 cents, and I'll hand it over to Anthony.
Thank you, Anthony.
Hey guys, I kind of want to circle back to something Dennis said, because I like what he said about a condition of appropriation, given that if we can't come to a determination by April, then it not be published due to what it could do to what it could look like with the override. And I just want a confirmation of the process. Is that something we can do, Dennis? Can we condition that on releasing the finding before April, and if not, to hold on to it after the vote?
That's a really good question.
Can I weigh in on this, since I always like to give a little disclaimer about conditions of appropriation?
Well, it's not a condition of appropriation per se. Right. So this is a different, the question is whether there is a mechanism to do what Anthony is saying.
Essentially, what you are doing is making an agreement with the requesting department. So essentially, if Chaz is on board with the concept, then that because there's no enforcement capacity. You know,
Right.
the comptroller, it's
Yeah.
a spigot. You yes, no, you give the funds or you don't. So it's really about the acknowledgement from the department that this is the way the funds will be used.
Chaz,
Okay.
do you agree with that framing, or what's your thoughts on that?
Sure. I would just say then that, there are two kind of asks on the table. One is that we get this done before April 1st, and the other is that an advisory committee member be involved in the scoping of it. And you can see how those might work at cross purposes, right? If you hold up the scope for a while, if you have a lot of people trying to throw things into the scope, then that limits the amount of time for the report. The report might not come out by and it's got to be March 31st. And ideally earlier than that, because the select board needs to have time to marinate on it and incorporate it into its thought process. So I would just say that, I would be happy to have someone on advisory take a look at this and make sure that the scope is appropriate. Maybe one of the TSP members, if it's Dennis or Cliff, great. I think that's how it was done last time, is that TSP really ran the contract. And I would be happy to have that happen again. And then, yes, I think we can, I want to commit to making sure that this comes out before a ballot question is set. That's the goal here.
And so not to act as and assert myself as some type of mediator here, but Dennis and Cliff, are you guys on board with that?
Sure.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cliff and I can arm wrestle over who gets to not have to participate in that process.
Can I buy tickets to that arm wrestling match? You can let me. Okay. So that's my condition. I think I agree with Jocelyn's motion. I think putting Dennis or Cliff as the advisory committee member to take part in that, with the expectation that we'll have that out before the ballot question's finalized. Thanks.
David Mark.
Thank you. I'm in favor certainly of having somebody on advisory do that. My concern about the timing of the completed report, and if it's not done by a certain date, that we hold off on it until after the May election, it could very easily be looked at by the voters as we're covering something up, we're hiding something. And I think that is an issue that we really haven't discussed. So if the report isn't ready and we say, okay, it's not ready, we're not releasing it until after the vote, people are going to say, okay, you're hiding something. What are you not telling us? I think that from a PR perspective, that could be incredibly problematic. I just want to put that out there.
Alec.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, I have to say I agree with David Mark. I think the concern around the timing of the release of the report makes sense, and I think Dennis is right, but I do think optics are important here. We're talking about something that I think is intentioned to be a trust-building measure, and playing games around the transparency or disclosure around whatever the final report finds is probably at cross purposes with that. At the risk of further complicating what is shaping up to be a fairly complex motion, I wonder if the compromise to that dilemma is we include in the contract a provision that requires that CLA make at least an initial reporting out of findings by March 31st, and that if there is further findings that warrant a final report to be issued, that be issued after a date set to be certain, sometime presumably after the first week of May. But that way, at the very least, whatever the initial findings are would be guaranteed contractually to be released before the question would be voted on by the select board. So that would give the CLA investigators the 2-week time period we've discussed for initial findings. If they find there's more investigating that's warranted, they would be, then allowed to further explore and release in a final report. If that's too complex, I understand, but I do share David Mark's concern about the optics issue.
Pam Lodish.
Thank you. I sit here and really wonder why we're doing this at all. Because I think that the $25,000, whether or not we do it or don't use it or don't use it or use it or do it, the staff, the report had to do with the old staff mostly. We have new staff that, God willing, is going to be able to address the concerns that came out of the report. And I would think it would be much more helpful for us to see this report in a year from now, when we really go back and look and see whether we're doing everything correctly. And I think it's too soon with the new staff to eat, whether or not we send out this report before April 1st, after April 1st. I don't think it's going to be meaningful in a way that it's worth doing at all.
I put in a comment. I'm really thinking that for all the sort of negative reasons people have said tonight, for the optics, if it doesn't come out in time, for the fact that if it doesn't come out in time, I think it's going to be leaked by somebody, and that's going to look optically not great. I have issues with the use of the reserve fund for doing this. And I go back to my original comment, which is I just think the whole thing looks like whatever way it comes out, the town is putting their thumb on the scale. And if it's not a campaign finance legal violation, I think it's sort of an ethical violation of it. So absent hearing something else, I will be planning on voting against this. Harry Bors.
Yeah, I've been listening to this going back and forth, and a couple of things struck me. There's this notion that a reason for doing this is to just verify, in essence, that the recommendations that have been made and the concerns that have been raised are being addressed. And, whether it's an issue of you think that the schools have the capacity or the bandwidth or anything else to really kind of do an appraisal of themselves within this regard, and you could ask this of any group, actually, or whether it's just you want to verify that even though this is a new group of people, that the structures are now kind of being solidified and carried forward. And that's just more a comment and a look at the structure, regardless of who the players are. So I hear that as one element. The other element, which sort of touches on what Pam was saying, is that, is it too soon to get really any meaningful information? This report has come out. The schools have looked at it. The superintendent has given a response to it. I think it was a well-written response. Though I will say, when I read what came out of CLA and I read the response, I was sort of like, okay, how do you mesh these together and digest them really? And it would be nice to get it sort of peer reviewed by a third party. But if it's too soon, then it's really not going to tell us a whole lot. I don't know that waiting a year is necessarily required. But why is it not worth thinking about planning on doing this, but after the election, one way or the other? It's not like the town's trying to hide anything. There's already been one report out. There has been a response from the schools. And I think it's reasonable to say, yeah, it was a different group of people. These issues were identified. We believe they're being responded to. Here's what the schools have said about their response. And we're going to give it a couple of months because we're going through the budget season right now and people have a lot of things going on. And we're going to ask CLA to go in and take a look and do an appraisal and say, is this working? Are these things being followed through? Which kind of changes the timeline, and it may change the intent of what Chaz and others have in mind. But it gets to the same thing without trying to squeeze it in too quickly. And maybe they come back with a report and maybe it really doesn't tell us anything meaningful anyway. And then everybody takes turns deciding, is it you're putting your thumb on this scale or putting your thumb on that scale, when really maybe neither.
Thank you. Elise.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the question is what is stopping us from putting out a preliminary report right now, and then putting out a fuller report later? Is there a way that we can negotiate a contract in that way? Because I think my fear is right now is that, if we only go with what the schools and Superintendent Wong says, and this is nothing against Superintendent Wong, I think she's doing a fabulous job, that there is a large faction of parents right now who are struggling to trust anything that comes out of the school department. And that for me is hard for me to even explain as somebody who has access to all of these reports and is following pretty closely, to try to help them better understand what's actually taking place. It's an emotional reaction and it's very visceral for them. So I'm wondering, is it a realistic question to ask or negotiate something that allows us to put out at least some preliminary findings that meets CAS's needs with the select board, and then a fuller report later that meets some of these other questions that have been popping up, because these are also very reasonable questions to ask.
Yes, it's possible to structure it that way. I think to Alex's point earlier, we can absolutely ensure that something is delivered. Again, what I want to be careful of, to both Harry's points, Harry Freeman and Harry Boers, is that what is delivered is valuable to the community and is not just, here's something very, here's what we got, and it doesn't really explain anything. I also want to be cognizant of the fact that if this desire of this committee is that nothing be published after April 1st, that then there be a very serious amount of protection around that, because I don't want it to leak or anything like that. And I think it would be important for us to, but I also understand, to Alex's point, you also don't want to be accused of hiding the ball. What I would suggest is that I work with whoever you appoint, Dennis, Cliff, whomever, and ensure that the scope of work references that meaningful work product to be produced and shared with the select board and the advisory committee before March 31st. And that in the event that there is additional work that needs to follow on from that, that work be presented confidentially after the 31st to the chair of the advisory committee and the chair of the select board only. And that they can then make a decision about whether to come back to this body and say, listen, we have this information. We think it's valuable to have a conversation about it. And this body can determine what to do at that juncture. But that way you have, in the event that these are kind of conditions on conditions, right? In the event that CLA produces something, they want to produce more, but they're not able to do so by March 31st, that whatever they want to do in terms of following on is subject to review and approval by this body, and that the people who see it are the chair of the advisory committee and the chair of the select board, and that's it. And that could be, I don't need to see it. I'll cut myself out of that process. CLA can deliver it just to them.
I'm going to call on several people, but I want people to remember we've got 4 or 5 budget items left tonight. They're small, but we have several. So, and I also have had I call the question, but it was done after Cliff put his name in. So I'm going to go to Cliff.
Thanks, Harry. So, to Harry Boers' comment, there are systems that have been put in place. There are procedures that have been put in place, not all by new personnel. And I don't understand why you'd wait to find out whether or not those systems and procedures that have been put in place to quote unquote address the matters that CLA came up with, you wouldn't want to have that information as soon as you could have it. And second, I'll ask maybe it's a rhetorical question, but who's going to pay for the study in 3 months from now, or 6 months from now, or 9 months from now? Because certainly the school departments, the school committee is not going to do it. And I'm not sure the select board's going to do it. And so are you suggesting that we come back for a reserve fund transfer then?
So mine was less of a comment, more of a question, just having listened to sort of those two primary themes that I was hearing. Is there any value to pushing to try and just get something out of the door in April, as opposed to upfront saying our intention is not to have anything probably until May or June, because we want them to do the work and we want them to verify these things, and we want to have them look at these things because they've been identified.
Yeah, so remember, I mean, they did their work in the spring in a fairly compressed time frame. Being able to go back and sort of verify, what was done in response to their work should be able to be done in a fairly compressed time frame. And I don't think it's putting any finger on any scale, but I also don't understand why there's a reluctance to provide whatever the information is to the public. This is exactly a situation where the public has a right to know one way or the other. I don't get it.
Well, I don't disagree with those elements. My response was more to people being concerned that it may not actually get done till the last minute. And I don't know how realistic that is or isn't. Your view seems to be they can do it pretty quickly, and maybe that is, but I was hearing people's concerns. Well, we're not sure, and should we have a contingency if it comes out late to then hold it and wait?
So I would like to interrupt for a second and say that we could just continue to keep debating this topic until April 1st, and then it'll be moot. There were two, although I was the one that asked Harry to call the question, but the two other people we haven't heard from at all tonight, Neil and Kelly, if you have very brief comments about topics we haven't heard.
Exceedingly quick. And I apologize for being late. And this is, a complicated, multifaceted discussion. But having spent a significant percentage of my career as an auditor and having served on public company audit committees, I just want to dispel the notion that oversight implies some search for wrongdoing and mistrust of the staff or whoever the oversight is. This is a committee that does oversight. It's what we do. And nobody trusts the staff as this committee does, for good reason. It's just that message is the wrong message, to suggest that we not do something because it will doing it will make people look guilty, incompetent, or otherwise. That's not how oversight works.
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay.
Sure, just a quick question. Getting back to Chaz's original introduction of this reserve fund transfer, we have come really far along quite a twisty path, and I guess I'm concerned about the political implications of releasing the results and how everybody has twisted themselves into knots over this. I feel like if we want to have this study done, we should have it done. And sort of like Neil said, the results should be made public and, sort of let the chips fall where they may, because this is indeed oversight. This is an audit. And as long as the current staff are willing to have this audit done, I feel like it's something that we should support at this time.
Thank you.
I think based on that discussion, we can start with the motion on the table, which is basically a motion to approve the reserve fund. And I think it's worth starting with Jocelyn's language included in that motion. I didn't hear any objections to anybody from this body or the town administrator. So I think the motion would look something like approval of a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $25,000 for follow-ups to the CLA school deficit review per the memo from the town administrator, subject to the condition that an advisory committee member participates in developing the scope and focus of that report. And then obviously taking into account all of the other, that person will be taking into account the implications of this conversation. So if that's a motion, I'll let Jocelyn make that motion and somebody can second it.
Second.
And now, are there any other amendments to offer? Okay. So if you're in favor of that motion, you're going to vote yes. If you think this is not the time or the place for any reason, you can vote no. And I will start at the top of the list with Harry Boers,
Yes.
Cliff Brown,
Yes.
Anthony Buono,
Yes.
Elise Couture-Stone,
Yes.
John Doggett,
Abstain.
Harry Friedman,
No.
David Mark Goldstein,
Yes.
Neil Gordon,
Yeah, lucky enough to have missed the early part, I'll abstain.
Susan Granoff,
Yes.
Gary Grossman,
Yes.
Kelly Hardebeck,
Yes.
Elisa Jonas,
Abstain.
Janice Kahn,
Abstain.
Brian Ladd,
Yes.
Alec Lebovitz,
Yes.
Carol Levin,
Yes.
Pam Lodish,
Abstain.
Jocelyn Murphy,
No.
Donnell O'Neill,
No.
Linda Olson Pelkey,
No.
Fran Perler. Did we lose Fran?
Sorry, I was on
Carl-
mute. No.
Okay. Carlos Ridwejo,
Sorry, but I'm gonna go 2 for 2. No.
Margaret's not here, Lee's not here, Christine Westfall.
Yes.
All right, by a vote of 12 in favor, 6 opposed, 5 abstentions, this reserve fund transfer passes. Cliff, you and I can follow up later on how we're gonna work with Chaz.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chaz. Thank you. Well, I think Melissa's probably staying for the remainder of the budget discussions.
Dennis, could you just repeat what the final vote was? I didn't catch it.
It was 12 in favor, 6 opposed, 5 abstentions.
Thank you very much.
All right. Let's move on to the advisory committee budget. Neil, who's going to be presenting for the subcommittee?
We're lucky enough to have Jocelyn Murphy presenting for the subcommittee.
Great. Go ahead, Jocelyn.
And thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you. So this is a relatively abbreviated report. The subcommittee met yesterday at 3:15 and conducted a public hearing. So there's been a shortened period of time, but I'll do my best. So for the advisory committee budget, Chair Dowdy reported that the advisory committee's allocated budget was increased by a whopping $49 to $32,022, and that the bulk of the budget is for the committee's invaluable administrative assistant.
And I use
However,
that word.
you didn't use, you said exceptional or words
Exceptional. Okay.
to that. However, the meals and receptions and supply expense items would be reduced by $750 in acknowledgement of the lean budget year and a reduction in meals due to the committee's mostly virtual meeting model. Our apologies, David Mark. By a unanimous vote, the subcommittee recommended an appropriation of $31,272 for the advisory committee's budget.
Objected there is because number one, we're going to be talking to Roy Cooper here live in just one moment, and number two,
I'll just mute Pam there.
Watching the election results while being an appointed member of your local government is really based. That's great.
Yes. All right. So I'll call on the chair of the advisory committee to add color. Jocelyn did a great job of summarizing the discussion. It was painful to acknowledge that we might have slightly less pizza this time around. I will say that we did increase the budget for services in the form of conferences and the like, because we have had some increased interest in participation in things like Mass Municipal Association meetings and the like. And we've typically underspent the food budget and overspent the conference membership budget. So trying to acknowledge that and come up with more realistic numbers. Questions from the committee, Carlos?
Does that mean that we're going to get cheese pizza instead of pepperoni pizza?
Quite possibly. We'll have to leave that up to Lisa.
Yes.
Sorry to hear.
All right. If there's no other questions or comments, we'll move to the motion, which is favorable. Oh yeah, we can talk later about our room reservations. Favorable action on fiscal year 27 AC budget. Jocelyn, can you give me the number again? I don't have it in front of me.
$31,272.
Favorable action on the fiscal 27 AC budget of $31,272. Harry B.
Yes.
Cliff.
Yes.
Anthony.
Yep.
Elise.
Absolutely.
That starts with A. John. John's not here. Harry F.
Well, despite the fact that it doesn't provide for stipends for the chairman and the vice chairman of the advisory committee, I will vote in favor.
David Mark.
Reluctantly, yes.
I figured you would abstain. Neil.
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
Harry.
Yes.
Kelly.
With appreciation for Lisa, yes.
Elisa.
Yes.
Janice.
Yes.
Yes.
Brian. Alec.
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
Pam.
Yes.
Jocelyn.
Yes.
Donnell.
Yes.
Linda.
Yes.
Fran.
Yes.
Carlos.
Despite no pepperoni pizza, yes.
Christine.
Yes.
And if John was here, we'll take a vote for him, but if not, fine. Oops, sorry, I dropped the screen down, but it passed 22 to 0. We can move on to the select board budget. Is that also you, Jocelyn? Are you doing all of the presentations?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
So the budget for the Select Board's office is increasing by a total of $3,590, which is less than 1%. This increase includes contractual staff compensation increases of $12,357 and an increase of $605 for leased computer equipment, all of which is offset in part by a reduction of $9,372 in professional services. Full-time equivalents in the office are decreasing by 1 net position due to phasing out of an office assistant position that was previously funded with American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds to help with fund tracking and disbursement. By unanimous vote, the subcommittee recommended the appropriation of $1,065,284 for the office of the Select Board. And hopefully Melissa Goff is here to supplant any of that if she feels it necessary.
Ms. Goff, you have anything to add?
Just my thanks and appreciation for both the subcommittee and the staff in the Select Board's office who, Charlie Young has done a phenomenal job putting together this budget. We also had Tyler Blyle and Nicole Lima helping us. Nicole's been staffing the Revenue Expenditure Committee. Really grateful for them. Rochelle Morrison does our licensing. Nicole also helps with the licensing. Kate McGilvery with the minutes. Christina Metcalf is our communications officer. And then Melanie Otska is just replacing Tiffany Oliva. who left us mid-year. So we are fully staffed and just really grateful for the staff that we do have in the office.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
My comment would be I'm very grateful for Melissa Goff, who does a remarkable job. Thank you,
Here,
Melissa.
here. All right, so then there's a motion from the subcommittee for favorable action on the fiscal year 27 select board budget of $1,065,284. Is there anyone who's planning on voting differently for the select board budget than they voted for our budget?
Dennis, I think we may have lost Danelle.
Okay, then I'll guess he's voting differently. Anyone, if no one else, I will just remove Danelle to not present.
I don't want to
that
abstain, but can I vote
sorry, I don't have a character for that.
Okay. I'll vote yes.
I guess that vote passes 21-0. Jocelyn, you're moving on to, you can pick debt and interest, unclassified, non-appropriated. Take your pick.
Let's go with debt and interest.
Okay.
Deputy Town Administrator Goff reported that the town's debt and interest budget has increased 12% to $49,425,313, which includes $1.4 million for roof repairs, $18.5 million for fire station renovations, and an estimated $77 million for the Pierce School. Questions from the committee came up regarding relevant metrics, including where the town stands with other municipalities with regard to debt and the status of the fiscal year 25 audit. Finance Director Heineman promised an answer to the metrics question and a copy of the executive summary of the audit. I don't know if those have been forthcoming. The debt and interest budget allocation of $49,425,313 was recommended for approval by unanimous vote of the subcommittee, although we are indebted in this amount.
Too late.
I don't, perhaps Deputy Town Administrator would like to add something.
Yes, Melissa.
No, I just think, so Jocelyn spoke about the things that we're planning on borrowing for this spring, mostly related to the debt exclusion. So that's where most of the growth is coming from. And that would be the last round of borrowing for the Pierce. We would still have 2 more rounds for the fire station renovations.
Other questions or comments?
Lincoln, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't. So thank you.
Carlos.
Yes, Melissa, can you just give us a really short, brief explanation of what this whole thing is about? I think it would be useful.
Sure. So we have a debt service budget that we use to basically provide funding for our capital improvement program. And so most of the payments that we are making under debt and interest are actually related to the debt exclusions that we've passed for school projects. Around $35 million of the budget is related exclusively to the debt exclusions. So essentially we are borrowing money and then we are owing principal and interest payments for school projects. The term's normally 25 years. For smaller projects like a park renovation, the term could be anywhere from 10 to 15 years. And so these are obligations that the town has made based on the bond sales that we've completed over the years.
I think the subtext of Carlos's question is, on the off chance that we voted no on this particular item, what would the impact actually be?
So these are obligations for the town.
Right.
I think that we would probably put our AAA, we would absolutely lose our AAA rating because the ability to pay and the town's commitment to paying is kind of paramount on that.
Right.
Lincoln, I don't know if you want to add anything
Yeah,
else.
I mean, we would default, the town would default on its debt. and a whole series of cascading terrible things would happen. But yes, certainly we would lose our bond rating.
I'm sorry I
at the-
interrupted you, Carlos.
Including, including
and I
at the
guess-
end, at the end, we have to pay the money anyway, because we're gonna lose.
And Lincoln,
Yes.
Carlos? Let's go on to Carol Levin.
Don't these debt service numbers assume that we are going to pass the CIP as presented to us? And aren't we,
Oh, sorry.
I would say, are we putting the cart before the horse?
No, these are commitments that we've already made. So essentially the authorization to borrow the money has already been given to us by town meeting. And so anything that we are looking for in fiscal 27, we would be then going out for the bond sale the following spring. So the items that we're going for this current spring have already been authorized by town meeting.
I never knew that. Thank you. So anything that we're approving in the CIP that says it's going to be bond financed will be projected next year.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Jocelyn.
I would just circle back to Lincoln. There were two outstanding questions that were posed regarding the town's standing with respect to other municipalities in terms of its debt. And the other question was whether a copy of the executive summary of the fiscal year 25 audit could be provided.
So, answer the second question, yes. In answer to your first question, so we went back and looked at what the State Division of Local Services gives for information when we're comparing ourselves against the other 350 municipalities in Massachusetts. So, we can provide any number of metrics. I think the primary metric that was under discussion yesterday was what is the town's debt service, general fund debt service as a % of budget. And that is,
Sorry, I thought it was total debt. Question was about total debt.
If the question's about total debt, we can certainly give that too. Just a moment. Sorry, I had it up and it died when we were. Just had to reload it quickly. The town's total outstanding debt, and that is excluded and within the not excluded within the general fund operating budget is $463,975,715. Happy to answer any other further questions about metrics on that.
Where the town stands with regard to other municipalities.
Sure. We are.
I think we were 23rd out of 551 on the general fund debt, but the question was total debt.
Fifth in terms of total debt. I think it's important to keep in mind that it's relational, right? Our budget is larger than obviously most of the 351 municipalities, but in terms of real dollar amounts, fifth.
Okay, thanks. And I think the other question related to the executive summary of the fiscal year 25 audit.
Yes. So I'm happy to send that around to the whole committee or individual members, whatever the advisory committee's pleasure is.
You send it to Lisa. She can attach it to this meeting and then also distribute it to the committee.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos Rueduejo.
Sorry, I lost my internet halfway through the question. So I don't know if this question was asked, but what is our percentage versus city to get sort of taxes and other revenues?
You broke up on that, Carlos.
Percentage of debt and versus capacity for revenue. So how much of our revenue is sort of, there's a metric over there, which is usually like 10%. Sorry.
Sure, so I can point you to the, I'm going to drop in the chat the section of the budget that actually has a lot of metrics around our debt that will probably answer what you're looking for. Debt as a percentage of equalized valuation, debt service per capita, and then measuring it against our policies as well. So you can see kind of how we lay out the various metrics.
And does that have any consequences with the rating agencies?
So I think that they acknowledge the fact that we are at a high level of debt, especially, you know, when you're looking at the total picture, but they also acknowledge the fact that a lot of this is excluded debt. So they do treat it differently when they are evaluating us. But it is something that, you know, as Lincoln said, we're kind of at the high end in terms of the overall debt level.
Thank you.
Carol Levin.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. In Budget Central, Melissa, you project outstanding debt. You start in fiscal year 2019 and you go out to fiscal year 32. But the table on debt service starts at fiscal year 20 and ends in fiscal year 26. And that's the table that really breaks down and makes it easy to understand what the components are of the debt service. And I'm wondering if you can provide us with a table that at least continues out to fiscal year 27, since we are approving a budget for fiscal year 27 debt service.
So there is there should be another table there. Yep, if you look at the total debt service as a percentage of revenue, that actually goes out to 2032.
But that doesn't break it down by exempt, non-exempt, minus state SBA reimbursed debt. It's the format of that debt service table that includes the enterprise funds debt service and gives you a total that makes it so descriptive.
Those same totals are in that table.
I guess I'm not seeing that.
It's just formatted differently.
Is it further down?
Yeah, it's further down. It's a yellow table with a black line and then blue and green at the bottom. It's right before.
I see. So you've repeated it.
Yep.
There. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I guess my only feedback would be maybe we can have fewer tables to make it easier to find the information.
Yep.
Thank you.
Dennis, I think that's it for comments.
Hey,
I
Ben.
take that back. David Mark.
I'm sorry. I just had a very brief question for Melissa regarding the ratings agencies. You have talked in the past about all the things that the rating agencies look at, including debt and whether the voters approved it and all that. But since we're going to be going through a period of very small growth in our revenue for the next couple of years, do they look at that and do they knock some points off of us if we don't have more healthy growth? What do they look at there?
I think, you know, the questions do vary from year to year. Sometimes they're really focused on our unfunded liabilities, but they always do ask questions about kind of economic environment and what potential new growth is coming online. Just a variety of questions on the town's overall fiscal health. So, you know, that is something, if we do have development coming, that's positive sign for them, because they understand the pressure on Prop 2.5 and, you know, the residential levy and, you know, voters' ability to continue to fund overrides and debt exclusion. So I think they like to hear when there are other signs of growth in our revenue budget as well.
Okay.
If I could briefly add the two metrics that Moody's, the ratings agency Moody's looks at that are directly within the control of the town are unassigned revenue as a percent of total prior year net revenue, and how we're doing on funding our unfunded pension and other post-employment benefit obligations. So those are the two areas, that the select board have adopted revised policies on to seek to move the needle most directly on the things that that the town government has the most direct ability to affect, unlike, for example, metrics that have to do with per capita income, for example.
Great. Thank you very much.
Dennis?
All right, we'll take a motion from the subcommittee. Favorable action on fiscal year 27 debt and interest budget of $49,425,313. I just put words in Jocelyn's mouth. Let's take a vote. Any of our members voting differently on this than they voted on the select board budget? Anybody left, Harry?
I think nobody is voting differently, Dennis.
And nobody is left either. So
And nobody, to the best of my knowledge, nobody is left.
Okay. All right. Jocelyn, we can move on. You can pick your poison for the next one.
Unclassified, does that sound good?
Okay. Sounds
All right.
delightful.
So items in the unclassified budget include the Select Board Contingency Fund, the Mass Municipal Association dues, property insurance, vocational technical tuition, the Reserve Fund, and transfers to other funds, including the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the Liability Insurance Fund, and the Stabilization Fund. Deputy Town Administrator Goff explained that the contingency fund had been set aside last year from funds for the Lincoln School grounds for special education. However, the school department will not be using those funds, and therefore $970,000 from this fund will be used for another need, such as snow and ice removal. She also noted a substantial transfer is being made into the liability fund to supplant funds that were expended for the previous year's police and school department litigation settlements. By a unanimous vote, the subcommittee voted favorable action on an appropriation of $12,213,211 for the unclassified budget.
Melissa or Jocelyn, part of this money is for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. CPA money now goes to that. Has any thought been given to somehow account for that?
We've had conversations about, so a lot of the funding targets that are part of unclassified are policy driven. So we are currently following the select board's fiscal policies, which essentially have an allocation of free cash for reserve fund, liability fund, affordable housing trust fund, and capital improvement program. And so we have discussed whether or not, with CPA in place, whether or not the board would like to revisit the policy around the allocation of funds for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. At this point, they have not indicated that they would want to change that. So right now that we're just following the recommendations of the policy, which basically call for allocation if the fund is below $5 million. At the time that we were measuring it, it was below $5 million. So that's why we have a recommendation of funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Thank you. Jocelyn?
Thank you. But this also raises the perennial Lee Selwyn question, which is why Voc Ed is included in this budget and not the public schools budget. Why MMA funds aren't included in the departments who attend those, who are members of the MMA, for example. And I guess the other one would be the Select Board Contingency Fund. I mean, why aren't those funds within those particular departments?
So the voc ed funds are actually for people who are parents who decide to take their students and not have them educated by the public schools of Brookline. So those are charges that come off the cherry sheet, and they essentially are a municipal expense because it's not provided by the school department. In terms of the Mass Municipal Association, so my individual dues are housed in the select board budget, but that account is for the townwide membership for the Mass Municipal Association. And then what was your third question, Jocelyn?
I think the other one was the select board contingency fund.
So the select board contingency historically has been outside of the select board budget, and it's been kind of to support just the select board activities, as opposed to the select board budget supports the functions of the office. So the contingency fund has traditionally been what we use generally to feed the board when they have their meetings. You know, when I first started, the board used to go out to dinner, and now we order takeout for the board. But and then any other kind of incidental, anything related to kind of the board's activities as well.
If I can also add, the last time the Lee Selwyn question came up, which is probably almost exactly 12 months ago, the other answer that Melissa gave then, but not now, is that it's better to have the funds available to flow to free cash than be part of another dedicated budget.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Carol Levin.
Hi, I have two questions about property insurance. I was surprised that it went down, even though it's just a minor decrease. Is that because of the Pierce School being demolished, or?
So I'm told the reinsurance market is just a little soft these days.
So I think that's just the quote that we got from our insurance agent. So that's essentially why it went down.
Are we carrying a lower insured value because of Pierce being demolished?
I know that's part of it. It'd be during this period when, when there is not a school to a fully renovated, built school to be insured at this moment. Yes, that is part of it.
And then I know you aren't going to do anything about it this year, but I'm really pushing for there being one place where you can understand what our facilities are costing us. And by having property insurance unclassified, instead of being with all the other facility expenses like repair and maintenance and utilities, it makes it really difficult to understand or to allocate the expenses accurately. So I'm questioning why we're keeping these unclassified, and if you can consider for next year having everything that would be related to the operations of the buildings.
I think that's, I think it's unclassified because there are a lot of expenses that are not allocated across departments for other functions as well. I think of like the IT function. A lot of the expenses in Fung's budget are they're for software that other departments use and things like that. So I think it's a little bit more complicated to set it up like that. And it's also managed by the purchasing department and not the facilities department. So that's part of the other reason why it's also segregated as well.
Okay. Still going to advocate for it, but okay, thank you.
Well, is it possible, Melissa, to follow up on that? I mean, we haven't explored the full panoply of options available to us in terms of the kinds of reports that we can generate out of the Budget Central. Is it possible to generate the kind of report that Carol's looking for that takes those items into account?
I think I would want to understand, how other communities report this as well, because I want to understand the utility in kind of restructuring this and what that would actually provide us.
Fair enough. It's worth a conversation.
Carlos.
Yes, I wanted to second what Carol just said, and add one more thing. So when the superintendent the other day gave a presentation to sponsored by the Brookline Parents Organization, she explained how you have sort of the non-allocated or whatever I can't remember what it's called, healthcare and other costs that are taken from the top, and then it goes into the split. And I think it'll be interesting in order to really understand what the schools and the town really gets at the end. I think it would be really interesting to see what sort of the allocation for healthcare is versus one side versus the other side, because I'm assuming one side has more employees than the other side has, and so therefore one side is costing more than the other one, even though it's taken off the top. And I think this includes facilities and everything that goes into the facilities, including insurance. And so at the end you can say, look, we're really spending this amount for the schools, which is a lot more than the actual operating budget, and we're spending this amount for the towns, which is also a lot more than the operating budget. Because what is it? It's like 200 million this year that gets taken off the top before the split, correct, Melissa? Some 194 or something.
Yeah, most of that is benefit related, but we do have the allocation town versus school, and we do report that when we report to DESE annually. And that is also part of what we report on in section 2 of the budget, when we show the pie chart that shows the percentage, basically our estimate for what the school budget truly is when you roll those expenses into the school budget. So we do provide that information.
So that budget, that pie chart does actually break down that $200 million.
Yes, it's
Okay.
coming off the estimates that we report annually to DESE.
So
Okay. And it would be interesting to communicate that to more people, because when they're giving presentations, it really feels like, okay, so of the $400 million budget, 200 million is unknown, because it goes, it's like it gets taken off the top and then it gets split 60-40. This is the way that, and I know that this is not the case, but this is the way that it's explained. And I think a lot of people are like, wait, what's going on with those 200 million? Why shouldn't we know more, or why is it taken off the top? It just complicates the narrative when people explain the budget to non-advisory committee members that are so deep into understanding it. So just
Yeah, and I think that this very budget is part of what comes off the top. So this is a prime example of the things that are, they're fixed costs. They're mostly funded through free cash, so it's not operating in nature. And so that's why it's kind of above the line, because it's coming from a different funding source.
But clearly some of that goes to the schools, and some of that, the schools have, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the schools have more or use more public buildings than the town does.
Yeah, yes, they have the majority of the footprint for public
And
buildings.
why would property insurance come out of free cash?
So no, not everything in unclassified is funded through free cash, but a majority of the liability fund appropriation is coming from free cash. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund appropriation is coming from free cash. 25% of the funding for the reserve fund is coming from free cash. So a lot of the things that are above the line also have a direct connection to free cash, but not everything.
I see. And you're still doing the increase in or the changes in property insurance, you're splitting 50-50 with the
Correct.
schools.
Yes.
Which is again problematic. And so the pie chart that shows the fully allocated general fund operating budget, the 56.6% to education, shows a per square foot allocation of the insurance costs, or did you just split it 50-50?
No, it's split 50-50.
All right, so this is not accurate then. If we're looking,
These are, I've always said that they're projections and estimates based on what we get from departments.
right, but to Carlos's question, we aren't really seeing the accurately allocated thing. Because we have the ability to properly allocate insurance.
It's more
We have the
precise, sure.
Yeah,
Yep, I said that.
okay.
Yep.
All right.
Cliff?
Yeah, thanks, Harry. So just so to Carlos's question, on expenditures and revenues, there was a subcommittee this past summer, that was looking at the town-school partnership formula. That subcommittee never really finished its work. But one of the recommendations, I believe that's certainly in draft form, is that that subcommittee or some group of individuals continue the work of what that subcommittee was evaluating, and the issues of where certain expenses, currently shared expenses, go, where they should be above the line or below the line, is an open issue that
And Congressman Jasmine Crockett now.
benefits for sure, as well as some other things that clearly would enable both the community to understand where costs really might lie. It also might help folks who are responsible for setting budgets have a clearer understanding of all the obligations that are being taken on by some of their decisions.
Yeah,
Thanks, Cliff. That's useful.
I agree that, this is something that we've been wanting for a while. I do think that there needs to be full engagement on both sides in order to make that happen.
Dennis, I think, did anybody else have a comment? Dennis, I think that's it.
Okay, so I think I hear Jocelyn moving on behalf of the subcommittee favorable action on the fiscal year 27 unclassified budget in the amount of $12,213,211. I'm going to go out on a limb. Yes.
Dennis, we lost Linda Olson Pelkey.
Okay.
Linda Olson Pelkey has left, and I will be changing my vote from yes to no.
Okay. Anyone else? Because if we have one more, I'm going to just read the names. All right. Harry votes no. And Linda is not here. All right. 19 in favor, 1 opposed. We've approved the unclassified budget. And that takes us to the last one, Jocelyn. Am I right?
Thankfully, yes, the non-appropriated. budget. So a reminder that town meeting does not vote on this budget because it's based on a number of required state and county assessments, including the Norfolk County and MBTA assessments, and a variety of others. Deputy Town Administrator Goff noted that the Norfolk County assessment, to her surprise, was level funded and that the MBTA assessment had increased by 1.3%. By a unanimous vote, the subcommittee recommended favorable action on a budget of $10,792,792.34.
All right. Questions?
No question.
Melissa, do you have anything to add, Melissa?
Nope, I'm just hoping that the Norfolk County stays level funded with the next iteration. That would be nice.
Okay. All right. Then we will vote on a motion from the subcommittee for favorable action. Jocelyn, can you confirm this number, 10,792,034?
Correct.
All right. Anyone changing their vote from the previous vote? That means you, Harry, I think, most likely.
No, the MBTA is on my shit list this year. I'm not voting for them.
So who
Okay.
are we recommending this to if town meeting
I-
doesn't appropriate this?
I don't know why did you vote on it?
Well, we approved the budget amount, right?
No,
As-
town
as-
meeting doesn't vote on non-appropriated. What would happen is essentially they would take this money out of our state aid allocation. If
I think it was for decorum, but I'm happy to
Yeah.
not vote.
I'm gonna vote no.
Was that David Mark?
Yep. Put me down as a no, please.
I might be a no
Alright.
as well. I'll join a trio of no's.
Yes. Janice, I'm gonna vote no as well on this. I'm really
Okay.
fed up with county assessments.
All right, I'm going down the list then. I'm sorry. There's
This is
too
how
many
rebellion
names to.
starts.
Harry Bors,
Yes.
Cliff. I don't hear Cliff.
Yes.
Anthony.
Yeah.
I'm also yes.
Yes. Sorry.
Anthony's a yes. Cliff's a yes. Elise.
Yes.
Harry was
Nay.
no. David Mark was no. Neil.
Yeah, on the basis that the staff got the numbers right, I vote yes.
Susan. Susan.
Yes.
Harry.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Elisa.
Yes.
Janice was no. Brian.
Yes.
Alec.
Though I share Janice's exasperation with the county assessment, I'll vote yes.
Carol.
Yes.
Pam.
No.
Jocelyn.
No.
Fran.
As much as I hate this assessments, I vote yes.
Carlos.
Yes.
Christine.
Yes, and I have to say, we spent, I don't know, over an hour on the $25,000 reserve fund transfer. A minute and 50 seconds on this. This is
We
what
should have
makes me
un-
crazy sometimes.
We should have taken $25,000 out of the unappropriated budget. Sure.
The matter of principle.
I understand
All right.
how it happens. There's a part of me that it just makes crazy.
All right. 15 to 5 to 0. All right. I think that was everything on the agenda for tonight, unless I'm misremembering something. Harry, do you want to give an overview of the next couple of meetings, keeping in mind that some of them seem pretty late and so therefore might be we might shuffle things around?
Sure. So this Thursday, the 5th of March, the only budgets we're doing are HR and personnel benefits. We're going to have a general discussion and assignment of the warrant articles. And the moderator will be visiting us and has something to say. Hold on.
Harry,
and
has
what-
the
and then
warrant
next
been
week-
signed?
I'm sorry?
Has a warrant been signed?
it will be
I
on Friday.
Melissa, could you repeat that?
It will be on Friday. We actually are scheduling a special meeting so we can execute the warrant on Friday so that you can get your work done sooner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Melissa, does
Um,
the index that you sent us, are the numbers going to change?
I don't believe so.
Okay. That's good.
So that's it for this coming Thursday. Next Tuesday, we're doing the two most important articles, Wooden Bark and Compensating Balances. And I believe we'll be doing the budget for the Finance Department. And then a week from March 12th, Thursday, we're doing warrant article 4, special appropriations closeout, and warrant article 13. Well, we may be doing warrant article 13. Warrant article 13 is extending the town clerk's hours. It's my understanding the town clerk has decided to take holiday. So we're either doing it without him or we're not doing it that night at all.
Right, I'll circle back on the finance department budget. We tried to schedule it for tomorrow afternoon. We're doing IT, but we didn't make the 48-hour posting notice cutoff.
Thank
So
you.
it's gonna have to be rescheduled.
Finance is
So-
gonna have to be rescheduled?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, so we are definitely not going to convene simply to do measures of wood and bark and compensating balance agreements. So we may not have a meeting next Tuesday, or Carla will give us a different schedule if it's appropriate.
It would be so much fun.
Are you signing up to deliver that speech? Is that what I'm hearing, Carlos?
As as English is a second language, no way.
And we've asked Lisa to try to reserve room 103 for Tuesdays in March for and into April for hybrid meetings, not mandatory in-person meetings, but as many members as we can get. And Lisa has been struggling. I don't want to speak for her, but she has been wrestling with the scheduling system and other departments, and is hoping to have good reports for us. But as yet, as I understand it, has been not rebuffed by any individual, but rebuffed by the infrastructure. So we'll keep you posted as soon as we have room reservations actually to report. Lisa, were you going to speak?
I was just going to say that I'm really stymied as to why it's become so difficult, but hopefully I'll find someone who'll be able to help me work through this morass. So.
All right. Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.